Imagine a foggy night on desolate backroads of Montana. A solitary figure, driving an old pickup truck, suddenly finds himself enveloped by an eerie stillness. The headlights of his vehicle pierce through the mist, illuminating the winding path ahead. As he rounds a bend, his eyes catch a fleeting movement in the periphery. He slows down, peering into the darkness, and there it stands. A hulking figure, unnaturally still, its form barely discernible in the gloom. The creature is massive, easily dwarfing any wolf or bear the driver has ever seen. It stands on all fours, yet its shoulders rise higher than the hood of his truck. Its fur, dark and matted, seems to swallow the light, creating an almost supernatural void. But its eyes, it's the eyes. They truly terrify him. Twin orbs, glowing a sickly yellow, fixed intently on him with an unsettling intelligence. The driver, heart pounding, feels a primal fear he hasn't known since childhood. He watches frozen as the creature opens its maws, revealing rows of jagged teeth that glint with saliva. A low, guttural growl reverberates through the night, vibrating the very air around him. He can feel the menace, the predatory hunger emanating from this beast. With a burst of adrenaline, he slams his foot on the gas, tearing away from the scene, vowing never to return to these haunted roads. This, my friends, is the Shunka Warakin. Alright, let's take a minute here. As you can probably tell with my voice, I am still under the weather. So I'm not pre-recording anything. I'm recording these every week that they're coming out. Hopefully until my voice gets better, and then maybe we'll get ahead a little bit. Also, this is the third time I've recorded this podcast for the Shunka Warakin, which is probably mispronounced, but and the computer crashed and the file was corrupted on the other two tries. So hopefully this one works out good. So let's jump into it. The Shunka Warakin, which is spelled Shunka-Warakin, and it is a legendary cryptid rooted in the folklore of the American Midwest, particularly among the native tribes of the region. Descriptions of this creature are varied, but common elements paint a haunting picture. Imagine a beast as large as a grizzly bear, but with the sleek, sinewy build of a wolf. Its fur is often described as dark, coarse, and so thick it seems to absorb the light, blending seamlessly into the night. The eyes are perhaps its most unnerving feature, glowing with a sinister yellow or red hue, piercing the darkness with an almost supernatural clarity. Legends tell us that it is a remnant of the ancient world, a creature from a long time forgotten that somehow slipped through the cracks of time into our modern age. Some say it is a spirit, a guardian of sacred lands wronged by man. Others believe it is a cryptid, a biological anomaly that defies the natural orders. Its name, Shunka Warakin, comes from the Iowa language, roughly translates to carrying off dogs, a nod to its ferocity and the fear it instills in those who encounter it. These creatures are said to roam the plains and forests, rarely seen but always felt. They lurk in the shadows, watching from the cover of night, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They are not a mindless predator, but cunning hunters, often stalking their prey for days before making a move. It is a creature of silence, moving through the wilderness without a sound, leaving only the faintest traces of its passage. Now, let's delve into some of the more chilling eyewitness accounts that have been recorded over the years. One particularly harrowing tale comes from a rancher in the early 1900s, living on the windswept plains of Montana. His nights had been plagued by an eerie howling that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. The mournful wails cut through the silence of the prairie, sending shivers down the spines of all who heard them. Over the course of the next several weeks, his livestock began to vanish, one by one, as if they had been spirited away by some evil force. There were no signs of struggle, no traces of blood, just the unsettling absence of his animals. Determined to put an end to this mystery and protect his livelihood, the rancher decided to confront whatever was terrorizing his ranch. Armed with his trusted rifle and a lantern, he set out one fateful night under the pale glow of a full moon. The landscape was bathed in an unworldly light, casting long, ghostly shadows across the open fields. Every rustle of the wind through the tall grass seemed amplified, making his heart race with anticipation and dread. As he approached the grazing area, the rancher noticed an unnatural stillness in the air. The usual nocturnal sounds of crickets and owls were absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that weighed heavily on him. His lantern flickered as if sensing the impending danger. Then in the distance he saw it, a monstrous creature standing over the lifeless carcass of one of his cows. The beast was unlike anything he had ever seen. It had the massive body of a wolf, yet its shoulders and forelimbs bore the unmistakable traits of a giant hyena, powerful and grotesque. The creature's fur was dark and matted, clinging to its frame, giving it a spectral appearance under the moonlight. Its eyes, glowing a terrifying red, were fixed intently on him, radiating an intelligence that sent chills down his spine. The rancher stood his ground, gripping his rifle tightly, every muscle in his body taut with fear and resolve. The creature's gaze seemed to pierce through him, daring him to make a move. It let out a low, guttural growl that reverberated through the night, a sound so primal and full of menace that it made his blood run cold. Summoning all of his courage, the rancher raised his rifle and took aim. His finger hesitated on the trigger as he locked eyes with the beast, feeling as though he were staring into the very essence of darkness. He pulled the trigger, the gunshot echoing across the plains like a thunderclap. The creature let out an unearthly roar, a sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath his feet. In an instant, the beast had vanished into the night, as if it had been nothing more than a wraith. The rancher rushed to the carcass of his cow, his heart pounding in his chest. The sight that greeted him was grisly. The animal's body was gutted, its insides strewn across the ground in a grotesque display of raw carnage. There were no tracks, no signs of where the creature had gone, only the chilling evidence of its presence. Shaken to his very core, the rancher knew that he had encountered something beyond the realm of normal predators. The legend of the monster had come to life before his very eyes, leaving behind a haunting memory and a tale that would be whispered among locals for generations to come. The creature had vanished in the night, but the terror it brought remained, a reminder of the dark, untamed forces that still roam the wild places of our world. Another spine-chilling account comes from a group of campers in the 1970s who ventured deep into the remote woods of Idaho, miles away from civilization. The forest around them was dense and ancient, a place where the towering trees seemed to hold secrets older than time itself. As night fell, the campers huddled around their crackling campfire, sharing stories and laughter, unaware of the lurking terror that awaited them. The first sign of trouble came with an unsettling rustling in the underbrush. The sound was faint at first, barely audible over the crackle of the fire, but it steadily grew louder and closer. The campers exchanged uneasy glances, their jovial conversation dwindling to tense whispers. Then came the low growls, the deep and menacing growls reverberating through the still air. The growls were unlike anything they had ever heard, primal and filled with a chilling promise of violence. Thinking it was a bear, the campers scrambled to arm themselves with what little they had, flashlights, a hunting knife, and a sturdy branch. They stood at the ready, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the firelight, hearts pounding in their chests. Suddenly, from the shadows, the creature emerged. Standing just beyond the reach of the fire's glow, it was a grotesque blend of wolf and bear, its form a nightmarish fusion of predator and monstrosity. The creature's limbs were elongated, its muscles rippled beneath the dark, matted fur that seemed to drink in the light. Its back was hunched, giving it a menacing, almost otherworldly appearance, but the most horrifying feature was its eyes, glowing orbs that reflected the flickering flames with a malevolent intelligence. The campers stood frozen in terror, their breath caught in their throats. The creature circled their campsite with a predatory grace, its eyes never leaving them. Each step it took was a silent, almost spectral step, the only sound being the rhythmic thudding of the campers' own hearts. As it moved, the firelight caught glimpses of its massive frame, revealing rows of jagged teeth and a snarl that promised a swift, brutal end. One of the campers, attempting to muster courage, shone a flashlight directly at the beast. The light cut through the darkness, illuminating the creature's grotesque features in horrifying detail. Its fur was coarse and thick, a deep, inky black that seemed to pulsate with a life of its own. The creature's eyes glowed brighter, reflecting the light with an eerie intensity that sent shivers down their spines. Just as suddenly as it appeared, the creature stopped, its gaze piercing the souls of the terrified campers. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the forest holding its breath in anticipation. Then, with a low, guttural growl that echoed through the night, the beast turned and vanished into the shadows, melting in the darkness as if it had never been there at all. The campers remained in stunned silence, the crackling of the fire the only sound breaking the oppressive stillness. It took several moments for them to regain their senses, the terror slowly releasing its grip. They quickly packed their belongings, too frightened to stay a moment longer in these cursed woods. As they made their way back to civilization, each step was haunted by the memory of those glowing eyes and the primal fear they had experienced. The encounter left a mark on their lives, a tale of horror that would recount in hushed tones, forever haunted by the memory of the beast. The creature had vanished into the night, but the fear instilled remained, a chilling reminder of the ancient terrors that still roam our world. Now, more recently in 2015, a seasoned hiker found himself wandering the untamed expanses of the Badlands in South Dakota. Known for its rugged beauty and profound isolation, the Badlands are a place where the veil between the known and the unknown seems especially thin. The hiker, a man with years of experience navigating the wilderness, had ventured off the beaten path, seeking the untouched serenity that only such remote areas could provide. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the jagged terrain, an unsettling sensation began to creep over him. The hiker couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer alone. The once comforting sounds of nature grew ominously silent, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the crunch of his own footsteps. He quickened his pace, his heart thudding in his chest, each beat echoing in the encroaching darkness. It was then that he heard it, a low, guttural growl, so deep it seemed to reverberate through the very earth beneath his feet. The hiker froze, straining his ears to catch any further sounds, but the growl was followed by a oppressive silence. Slowly, with a sense of dread mounting, he turned around. His eyes, adjusting to the dim twilight, lay on a pair of glowing orbs in the distance. The eyes were an unholy light, a sickly yellow that seemed to burn with an inner fire. As the figure materialized from the shadows, the hiker's breath caught in his throat. The creature was enormous, dwarfing any predator he had ever encountered. Its body was sleek and muscular, covered in dark, matted fur that seemed to absorb what little light remained. It moved with a predatory grace, each step silent and deliberate, closing the distance between them with a terrifying inevitability. The hiker, despite his extensive experience in the wild, felt an icy fear grip his heart. He knew instinctively that he was facing something far beyond his understanding, something that defied the natural order of the world. The creature's eyes, locked onto his, were filled with an evil intelligence, as if it were measuring him, assessing his worth. Time seemed to stretch on infinitely as the two stood in their eerie standoff. The hiker, too terrified to move, could only watch as the beast's nostrils flared, its breath misting in the cool air. The beast growled, rumbled again, a warning, a challenge, or perhaps just in dark amusement. The hiker's mind raced, every survival instinct screaming at him to run, but his legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot by sheer terror. After what felt like an eternity, the creature finally made its move. With a slow, almost disdainful turn, it backed away, its glowing eyes never leaving the hikers. The Shunka Warakin melted into the underbrush, its massive form swallowed by the shadows, leaving the hiker standing alone in the oppressive silence of the Badlands. The hiker stood there for several moments, heart pounding, every muscle trembling with adrenaline. He couldn't believe he escaped unharmed. Gathering his wits, he quickly made his way back to civilization, vowing to never venture into those cursed lands again. His encounter left him with a story that would haunt his nights and chill the hearts of even the bravest listeners. The beast had spared him, but the memory of those glowing eyes, that primal growl, would stay with him forever, a reminder of the lurking horrors that still roam our world. These accounts, while terrifying, only scratch the surface of the Shunka Warakin's legend. Whether it's a beast of flesh and blood or a spirit of vengeance, its presence in our world is a reminder of the unknown, the unexplained, and the unfathomable. Thank you for joining me tonight on this journey into the shadows. And remember, dear listeners, the world is full of mysteries and terrors that lurk just beyond the edge of the firelight. If you ever find yourself in the remote plains of the Midwest, keep your eyes open and your senses sharp, for you never know when you might encounter the Shunka Warakin. Till next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay safe.